Yes, I'd like to call this Facilities Committee meeting to order. It's April the 14th, 2021, and I want to see if we have any public comments. Connie?
We do not, sir.
We do not. So we are going to dive into something that we've been anticipating now for several months. I will have just a couple of comments up front. We knew it was going to be a lot. And the 500 pages of the one report, there's a few things I took away when I was looking through all that. Number one, there's a lot of job security for you and Mr. Bennett tonight. I knew it was gonna be comprehensive, but when you see pictures of loose bolts on the tops of buildings and spots where there's no paint, it was overwhelming to see how comprehensive this thing truly was. Very, very impressive. And the other takeaway I got from this was I didn't know how many hot water heaters we had built. But we got hot water heaters. And the last thing I'll say is that I want to commend the previous administration and David and the people, because our facilities, for our worst elementary to be at 42% and have it be as old as it is, that was impressive to me that we've done that, and the learning environments are really good. I think technology across the board, I don't think it got higher than a 2 on any of those in any campus. But I was impressed by how well they've maintained, and our roofs for the most part across the district. Those folks did a great job, and Mike, y'all picked up, and David. So I was impressed by that. That even though we have some age on some of our facilities, they're performing. I mean, Tarver and Lakewood scored the same as our oldest campuses, and they're so much younger. I guess that goes to the fact that we didn't really change how we thought about education for about a 50-year stretch. And then the newer campuses have a different concept of learning, so I think that's why we had that consistency in the score, even though the campuses were about the same. But that's it. I'll shut up.
Well, we appreciate those comments, and I think you're right on the money. There's a ton to be proud of, all this assessment, and I think that it gives us a good foundation. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike and Melinda to get us rolling today, because I think we've got an action-packed agenda for us. So,
All right, I'm going to kick us off. We're excited because a lot of this work is anchored in the goals that you adopted this summer for us. Goal 5 in particular on the next slide is looking at maximizing our use of resources for both current priorities and plans for the future. And embedded in our key progress measure was the need for comprehensive needs assessments. And as you said, Ty, this is a very comprehensive facilities assessment. And so that's our purpose tonight, is to talk to you about some real quick overview of process tools that we're getting out of this assessment, high level findings. We're going to dig into dashboard and then get some of your reflections. And so we appreciate that you're here. We're excited. On the next slide, the journey began with the adoption of those goals. So we're here tonight talking with y'all. We'll receive your input. Your feedback, and then we're going to be before the entire board next week during the workshop, really digging in and talking about this and next steps. And so Mike's going to take it from here, talk about, and we'll do some introductions. We have some team members here that we want to introduce you to again.
Yeah, and we spoke with y'all a couple of months ago about our consulting team and kind of who was involved in this project. We're fortunate we have some of the members here tonight. So Tracy Richter, who represents HPM and has been a close contact with all of this work that's gone on. I'm going to let him introduce his team that's here tonight, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the process.
Okay, thanks, Michael. So we have, first of all, from Into Architecture, Irene Gaglione behind me. She worked close with Melinda and she carried a lot of hats in this, actually. She did the architectural assessment of facilities for the condition side. And then she did the adequacy assessment, which is on the educational side. But she worked with Melinda and her team throughout the journey of the graduate and made sure that those were adopted rules before the assessment was applied to your facilities. And so standards were developed out of that. So Irene worked with stakeholder groups to, and not in the easiest situations because it was all online, but had workout groups, breakout groups, and try to get as much input as you could. to get to that report. So she carried a lot of hats in this, and which is pretty typical in a process like this for the architectural assessor to be able to do that. Behind me is Anna Sullivan. She's from HPM also. She worked after her work throughout the process has been cost estimating, and I think for a process like this, cost estimating early is important. And being able to cost estimate it out in time is going to be really important. So as she worked through it, but at the end, as we're getting this kind of really getting the screws down on this thing, she worked with David and his team to look at how we're going to cost and inflate out. And so that's going to be her role even moving forward. And then Gary Rademacher right here, he's on the plan, he's the director of planning, so he's been looking at basically quality control of the data getting in the dashboard. So as much data as you see, and these are great reports, this deliverable that is front facing, that one's kind of hard. So he's kind of running that in the background with Timothy Gallagher, who is our GIS analyst. He's working in the background too. We also had EMA, who are a statewide engineering firm, did the condition assessment. I don't know, it was 35,000 line items of data or something that they plowed through on top of serial numbers and, getting everything. So you can imagine the Herculean effort on those guys' part. And then Texas Pro Roofing was another group that came in, and Dustin came in and walked every roof. He got on every roof. You could see the pictures. Was very thorough in it. And so you have as good as detailed assessment from this team as you could get. So there is, we were asked about the hours. I couldn't tell you the hours yet. We're gonna figure that out for you, because I think it was a lot. So that's our team, and so you know all the background of us. So thanks for letting us introduce you.
Yeah, the interesting thing on Dustin and the roof, Texas Pro, they use a drone also, and some of our schools are close enough to the airport over on 36 that they couldn't use the drone on those schools, so that was kind of an interesting facet as well. So next slide.
That was another takeaway, was Dustin King must be a great dude.
Yeah.
He was crawling all over those buildings.
So,
He doesn't mind heights.
No, I would get fired first day.
well, and the level of detail too, is there's a tree limb hanging over the southwest corner of a roof of a building somewhere, very good. So Tracy mentioned developing standards, and I think one of the things we really wanted to point out today, that we didn't go very deep into developing standards the first time we talked to this group. We just said standards were developed and we're going to do assessments. But developing standards was so important in this process because not only are these standards based on a variety of factors, throughout the process, we were able to have input in developing these standards. And I think that's very important. And we didn't just hire a firm. They came in with nationwide industry standards, applied those standards to what we have, and then told us what their conclusions were. So kind of what that process looked like is on the conditions side, like we said, we worked real closely with HPM, with EMA, and with basically all the groups, Into and Texas Pro. But we had meetings up front. They didn't just meet with us, our administrative team. They met with our plumbers, they met with our electricians, they met with our HVAC guys, and they found out what do we have that works well. What we see coming down the road, what are some things they really need to drill in on and make sure that they get the most accurate data they can. And so they spent the time up front before they ever walked to campus to really get our perspective on kind of what what we have here and what we've done. And then as far as the adequacy standards, Into really, and Irene and the team, they worked with our administrative staff. Each district principal was able to have input, and they all did, and we had 100% participation in that process, so all of our campus principals were involved. We relied heavy on our journey to graduate. There was actually some timeline discussion to get to today, because we kind of wanted to wait until the journey to graduate was done before we slid heavily into the adequacy standards. So I know originally we were kind of shooting for a March, but we ended up, because of the journey to graduate and wanting to do that right was a really important part of that adequacy portion. And then Irene, like I say, she's walked each campus. She walked the campuses with our directors, with our principals. I know Sam and Keith and Stephanie, I think, all got to spend time with Irene in our facilities as well. So it was a very thorough process. And then, I feel like it was personalized, and I think what you see is, as a result, as we talked about these standards and what we got from our assessment, I think you'll see that it was individualized and and did get us to the point that we're at today, which is a facilities assessment. And so I want to, our goal, can you go back one slide? So kind of our goal on this is, and we were up front with HPM in our RFQ that went out, and as we started setting out our program guidelines, is we truly wanted an assessment, because typically a lot of school districts will do this assessment in alignment with, you do the assessment and also bring us a list of recommendations of what you think we need to do moving forward. And so we kind of want that process to be a separate process. We wanted to get level one of this to be the data points where we have the information we need, and then level two, which will be our next step, will be in the planning and development. So that was important to us, and to work with them in a process that wouldn't, and so what you're gonna see is sometimes when we start getting into deficiencies and things like that, something may not be listed because we don't have it. If we don't own it, they can't access it if we don't already have it built. So we wanted a process that gave us data and gave us information, but didn't say, this is what you should do, this is what you should do, but here's what you have. And so what we wanted to know, what do we have? What condition is it in? What can we anticipate in costs for repair, maintenance, replacement of our current facilities? And then can our facilities meet the needs of our students based on our growth, based on our demographic projections, based on our journey to graduate competencies, our strategic plan that's going to be finished here in the next few weeks, and those types of things. So the fun part of this project for me is going to be what comes next. So we take all of this information and all of these strategies, and then we start putting it into a process where we develop long-term strategic plans, long and short-term maintenance plans, renovating and repurposing plans, building budgets out. I mean, we should be able to build out 5, 10, 15, and 20-year facilities plans for roofing and HVAC and plumbing and all those sorts of things based on the data that we're going to get from this report. Next slide, please. You can see as y'all look through the reports, and we're going to dive a little deeper into one report specifically tonight, and then into a summary, is everything from the MEP side and everything from the condition side was given a priority. So, meaning if it's a priority one item, it's either something that's a legal or safety issue, or it's something that is probably going to be a system that is going to have to be addressed within the next 1 to 3 years. If we get to a priority 2 item, it's going to be a systems item that's probably going to have to be addressed within the next 4 to 7 years. Priority 3, 8+ years. Maintenance would be our annual, it's low ticket items that are your annual types expenses that they saw as needs. And then we also asked them as a separate portion to go ahead and, as they run our campuses, address future ADA and accessibility concerns that we may have. So like we all know, buildings built at different times, there were different laws in place for accessibility. So we want to make sure that we know what those considerations are, that as we do make plans to renovate, remodel, those types of things, we know what the ADA considerations are going to be as well, or as we add programs to buildings as well. There's going to be one that you'll see a little bit that is going to be an FC, which is future considerations, and that's going to be something that is probably, as a general rule, I'd say 15 or more years out. So it's like a roofing at Charter Oak Elementary. I mean, the school's less than or 1 year old, but we're already planning in this assessment for what a roof might cost in 2035 or 2040 based on that.
That made me just heart palpitate a little bit thinking about that.
Next slide. So the approach for forecasting costs, Tracy mentioned this briefly, that Anna had an instrumental role in this, and she worked hand in hand with David and his team. So not only did we go through priority by priority and make sure that we had our items in the right category, but we also came back and made sure that we tried to cost it out where we would have some accurate pricing that may be. So if you have a roof project that's 8 years down the road, the pricing in our assessment would reflect what that roof would likely cost 8 years from now. So it's not current pricing. So if some of the pricing in priority 3 items seems really elevated, well, that's because it's priced at 25% above current pricing, just to kind of give us an idea of what it will probably cost when that work comes to
It seemed like most roofs are about 800 to 1,000 to $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
Just boom, write that check. So it
Yes.
just seemed like that seemed to be pretty consistent.
Next slide. So, a little just in very general terms, when you talk about a facilities condition index, it's basically a formula that is used that calculates the renovation versus replacement costs. So when you see a facility with a conditions index, you're basically analyzing the cost to fix the things that would need to be fixed or the cost to build. So a lower, next slide, a lower facilities conditions index would indicate a building that's really in great condition and needs very little to be done. A higher conditions index would indicate a building that probably needs more work to be done to meet our standards. So just in a general term, and the reports outline it a little bit more specifically, but in a general term, let's say you're sitting around the 15% mark. You probably have some repairs that need to be made. You start getting into the 30 percentile or so, you're probably gonna have some major renovations that need to occur. Once you start getting to 50, 60, 70, 80%, then you're probably gonna have to, at some point, consider replacing that building because it would be more expensive to keep it online than it would be to just rebuild. Next slide.
So the educational adequacy score, Tracy talked quite a bit about process and what we went through to develop the standards for this one. But just real quickly on this one, so our Journey of the Grad Design team, they were asked the question, what are some of the student experiences and things we would hope to see in classrooms if our Journey of the Graduate competencies are really coming to life? And so the design team brainstormed what they would want to see in the classroom. And then they were asked, okay, then now let's think about the physical environment, the classroom itself, the learning space itself. For those experiences to happen, then what would we want our physical condition, our physical classrooms, learning spaces to be that could really accentuate growing those competencies? And so through that brainstorming, the team then had to prioritize and list what are the top things then most important to support our Journey to Graduate. And so flexibility, technology, furniture, safety and security, and collaboration, those were the things that rose to the top from that group. They then were asked, okay, then within flexibility, for example, then what would we hope to see? And so on the next slide, let me give you just a quick example. Rubrics were developed for each of those attributes we were looking at in terms of our learning spaces. And so for flexibility, technology, furniture, safety, and collaboration, all of those have a rubric, a scoring system of a 1 to 3. And so we took the draft of these rubrics to the district leadership team. They tweaked them a little bit more, gave input back to Irene, and then all of our learning spaces, all of our buildings were then assessed using these rubrics. And so that's where when you see scores for technology, for example, Ty, that you mentioned, it doesn't mean that we have terrible technology. That's not what that score means. But what it means is when we look at this rubric and our hope for the future and supporting and growing these attributes, then there might be some work to do in those areas. But I can also tell you, we can be in the oldest building in this district that maybe had a low score for collaboration, and I promise you, we can get great collaboration in those buildings. Might it be easier if there's some spaces to support it? Yes. So, I just want us to be careful on those scores because it doesn't mean our buildings are in bad shape, but it means aligned to the Journey of the Graduate, there could be enhancements we choose to prioritize that might better support the growth of those competencies.
Melinda, real quick, when you say Journey of a Graduate Design Team, that is the group that we had with over 100 people?
Yes.
Okay, so that group that met over 100 people, community members, teachers, everybody,
Students.
and they're the ones that helped create that?
Yes.
Okay.
I think some of y'all might have been on that work too that night, so.
There's 4 of them, right? I think I said it on 2.
Yes.
General conditions assessment overviews, I not to read these to y'all, these were some of the observations that as we were going through the data with our team from HPM and the groups over the past few weeks, these are some of the things that have stuck out. And obviously, Ty, you mentioned it, Irene has mentioned it, I think every time we meet, is that we do have well-maintained buildings here, regardless of age, regardless of usage. we have staff and people that take care of things. And I think that's a real attribute to everyone that has served this district, on the board level, administrative level, all the way down to teachers, custodians, the whole thing, facilities folks. So we're gonna kind of go through, I mean, the older buildings do have dated systems for the most part. They do have, we are gonna have to look at some building automation systems at some point in some of the older buildings. One of the things that's stuck out, it's not a good or bad thing, is that we do have different styles and manufacturers of roof systems throughout the district. And why are roofs so important? And why did we use a separate assessor for roofs? Because it's a big ticket item. It's a lot of money to redo roofs on buildings of this size. And it's something you only do if you do it right and do it well every 20 or 30 years. So roofs are very important, and we wanted to get a very thorough exam of that. And then implementation of design standards. One thing we've talked about is as the teams have gone from campus to campus to campus, is, do you use the same faucet everywhere you can use it? Do you use the same water heater? Do you use the same AC unit? Do you use the same shower head? The same toilet, the same urinal, all those sorts of things. So I do think coming out of this, as we plan for the future, we'll probably take a good look at design standards too, and for our mechanical and facilities needs. The one thing that we're gonna ask you guys tonight, and then we're gonna ask you again on Monday, is just kind of some general observations you've assessed throughout this too. As y'all study this and look at it and discuss it more and see more, y'all are gonna have observations that may be different than what our observations were. So we are gonna be interested to hear your feedback in that regard. Next slide. Melinda kind of hit on this a little, is to make sure that everyone understands that these index scores and these adequacy standards are not a reflection of what's going on in the classrooms. So, we did observe teachers to see how that space is being used. We observed the space and measured it against the standards that were set forth. So does that, because I don't want anyone to look at an index score and say, oh, we got a 1 on collaboration. That doesn't mean that space isn't being used for collaboration. It means on the standards we set up, it's not the most ideal space that could be used for collaboration.
Well, I think I said this in a meeting or two, that when Matt and I toured Miller Heights and Chisholm Trail on the same day, I chose those two campuses on purpose. And the thing that I took away from is the active learning and teaching that I saw on both campuses were the same. There was no different in quality of education that was going on. Facility-wise, there's a big difference. But I commend all of the teachers at both of those campuses, as different as they were. The kids were engaged, the teachers' hearts were in their lessons. And I want that to, some of our buildings are prettier than others, but it doesn't mean those kids aren't getting educated. That's needs to shine through in what we say too.
And if I would just add, on the technology one, for example, some of those scores, if we value flexibility, if we value collaboration, in a lot of our spaces, projectors are fixed to the wall, the ceiling, and pointing one direction. So it's not that we don't have technology, and we're thankful and lucky to have that. But if we also value the flexibility and the small group and collaborative spaces, then what we talked about in that rubric was we'd like the technology to be flexible as well. It would be awesome if I have a group over here and we need to display something or cast something, that we have the flexibility to move that technology around. And so that kind of flexibility is what contributed to the technology scores.
And talking a little bit about the adequacy scores and the observations, just on a personal level, I like the scores we have, because I think for the most part, since we created the standard, I think if we would have looked at this assessment and we had 14s and 15s all the way up and down the board, I think we probably wouldn't have set our standards as high as we need to. And so that's what I like about the process, is we did set high standards. And when you think about technology, and as you look at the rubric, mobile technology was like the number one thing on the technology standard. So if that's the standard, and we do, and so those are the things that we'll aspire to as we plan and as we build out future. But I think we could have set our standards too low if we would have came in and everything would have been out the roof. So the fun's gonna be the collaboration and the planning that takes place now to figure out how to best use our facilities and resources in terms of flexibility, collaboration, technology, safety, and furniture, to allow our kids opportunities for exceptional learning. So I think that's the exciting part of this, is we have the data, now we get to go through the process of figuring out how to get there using what we have. Next slide. So we're gonna spend the majority of the rest of our time today is gathering feedback from you guys, but also diving a little deeper into some of the tools that we have. And so we've asked Tracy to kind of lead us through a dashboard exercise and kind of start answering questions, start showing you features and functions, and gather some feedback on our dashboard, which is really, I kind of picture it as it's a spreadsheet on steroids. It's kind of what it looks like to me. So,
Okay, so let me, bring the technology up to you guys.
That was an interesting number when I saw it, the 12,000 and the 16,000. I guess we're, with charter and with like Belton, that's where all that space is still with the numbers.
And any of those schools that have 22 seats available in them and stuff, that all adds up to that functional capacity number, right?
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily always in the right spot, but it's important for us to remember that.
Just have to get this open the wrong way. Do it. Yeah, that's what I had it down.
So while he's punching that up,
sure.
you know how much I love the colored list, right? The
Yes.
blues, the yellows, the reds. I'm assuming that at some point, we're gonna basically narrow this down to that same kind of thing with the class 1, class 2s, class 3s, right? Because there's a lot of these things we need to get on. Some of
Yeah,
these,
that's right.
we need to go ahead and get on that and then talk to our favorite CFO to find out, you know, if we have money to fix these things, that kind of thing, right?
Well, see, we kind of liken this to, this assessment hopefully gives us pretty much everything that we could address, and then our job is gonna be to figure out what we want to address, what we can address, and then prioritize those things out. So,
And that's part of the reason Mike elaborated on this earlier. And I think HP was okay with us saying that there are a lot of groups that would like to say, here's the plan that we recommend to you. But with this existing facilities committee, some of the work that we need to do is to be able to sit as a committee and say, here's the data that we have. What is it that this committee really wants to talk to the entire board about? Because that's where our board voices really come in, because all of this is good, and it's all tied to dollar signs, and one of the most important things you do as a board is adopt a budget. And so we have to keep thinking about how we rank those and what the function of this group is really in that.
do we need to,
Need a bigger screen.
That's it, need a bigger vote, don't you? Just trying to move the vote, man. I'm trying to.
Was that part of the assessment right there? Is that how this works?
That's kind of what I felt like when I was going through the dashboard. Punching buttons.
Maybe, let me think I can do it, give me 1 second.
Did you put in just?
I did, and then I messed up, and then I exit out and just restart, because I'd get lost, but I think that.
I think what has to happen is I have to get my display. I think my display just has to show my desktop and not it has to do it. That's what I do. So,
It was interesting when I was reading through this, when I saw technology at Belton High School, my youngest is still in high school. And she talks about their internet connections all the time. And I hear about it almost every day. So I thought, yeah, we can't be better than one. And I know there's different criteria, but we have some real issues over there with some connectivity. Because Gracie talked about it.
It's that whole area. It's
Yeah.
not just, it's the high school, it's the 9, it's Sparta, that's called Black Hole.
Is it?
Oh, yeah.
And you can't get
I can't get some.
reception over there.
No, in
Like-
Sparta, you can't get anything. Missy's told me to, if you need something, you gotta have to email me because her phone doesn't work.
So they looked at like internet connectivity, they looked at, data drops,
Repeaters don't work
just
either.
charging stations, you know, and having access to charging your devices. Our older facilities only have so many plugs. So those are some of the things that contributed to that as well, to that score.
But when we were doing the tour of the, press boxes, I don't remember which one it was, but one of them had one of the towers in there for charging station. up in the press
That's
box.
right, yes.
They're not expensive, they wouldn't be hard to come by.
Yay.
Had to go to more of a, instead of, just had to duplicate my settings, that's all. I'm gonna reduce this a little bit back to 100%. There we go. Okay, so, and it is gonna be hard to see up here, and you've seen it on your computer screens probably in front of you, but there's a lot of different things that you can see on here, and I'm actually gonna go to a school building so you can see just more specific data in here. I'll just drop them down. So we're gonna look at this, and there's all kinds of things that you can see on the first page. The first one obviously is a big pie chart, and what this is just shows you the number of items by priority and by adequacy. You have a facility condition index, and there's also a little indicator right here that has a question mark on it. Okay, so you can click on that question mark, and it actually goes to a document that gives you a glossary of terms. And it depends, we're still discussing on what's gonna be front-facing to the public versus what the board and all this, because there's a lot of stuff in here that, I mean, we'll have like floor plans and things that you may wanna keep on your guys' side.
Right.
So, so we're working through that kind of front side of what will be displayed, but that'll show kind of for you guys when you wanna see or explain what an SCI is, click on it, you can read what an SCI is, and you can explain it pretty quickly. Other things on here that are really cool, you've got a school locator, and so you can pull up the school locator, and what this does is it allows you to just put in an address, and so you may wanna put in like, 200, North Wall Street,
Or you can click on the map, right?
what was that?
You can click on the map.
And you can click on the map too all day long, so again, this is,
There's a school zone.
which is really nice because what will happen is that you guys have a lot of people moving in, right? So they can type in an address and they can see their elementary, middle, and high school feeder immediately, so they can kind of navigate, like if they hear about, I wanna go to this school or this school or this school, they can actually look at that, and this will be really useful because as you grow and you have to change boundaries around a little bit and you adjust them, this will be a great tool for you during a process like that, to be able to use it as those change too. So that was one tool you could go to, and then you can also go into this map here, and this is more of an aerial map, so you can go to the sites and you can see them on the sites. This is your projected enrollment by school, as you go across, and you can see the growth of the school. And then this is your utilization, so your current enrollment to your functional capacity. Now, we'll talk a little bit about functional capacity here, is that we're still working to get some details in your functional capacity. And the reason for that is that this is really, really important to get the functional capacity of your buildings right. And it's the details that you don't think about in functional capacity, because right now you have some standard design capacities, but that's not realistic. And the example I always give is that when I'm looking at a high school and I've got computer labs, a lot of people say, well, computer labs should have capacity because it can hold students. Well, the problem is that a computer lab can actually be a resource lab. So it's what the English department uses for their class in the computer room. Well, that doesn't have an FTE in it, so I wouldn't give it capacity. But I can have a computer room right next to it that actually has a computer teacher in it that looks the same, smells the same, feels the same, has all the equipment in it, and it can carry capacity. So when you're working through details of a functional capacity, those are the details we're working on. Michael and I are working on with the principals to make sure that we're getting those right. Now, your functional capacity will change. So this number will always be updated. Next year, elementary schools, you may add a special education classroom, which reduces the number from a general classroom. So your functional capacity in this dashboard will always be updated to the program that's in it. And so I think that's a real important tool in here. So there's other tools that you can go to, like you're gonna pull up, for instance, you'll pull up the priorities. And I think this is a real important piece for you all to see. Now, right now, we're working through some functions on this, but when you pull up the priorities, it pulls up the total district-wide priorities to start. Now, we're still working on, again, this is where all the data in the background gets really wonky. We're trying to get to a point where we pull up Sparta just comes up. But right now, you have to go in here, and what you do is you drop down onto a school. And you can drop down to, this one, and I can blow it up a little bit. So you can see for this is, this is just your swim, that's not a good one. But if I pull up Charter Oak, I can go down and I can see Charter Oak has about $2.3 million worth of deficiencies in it. And you can go through and you can see what all the deficiencies are here. But what's great about this tool is that I can not just do that, but if I go over here and I click off of that one, I can go over to just a system, and I can pull up a system, and I can say, well, I want to see all the doors that have deficiencies in the district. So when I pull up the doors, I see there's $544,000 worth of door deficiencies out there. And so what's great about this tool here is that when David goes in here, he can pull up systems just like that individually, and he can group them together. And the reason for that, and why this is an important tool, because let's say he wants to do a lighting project. Well, the lighting project is great, but David knows that when I do lights, I'm gonna have to do ceiling, I might have electrical, so he can actually package systems together to see what the deficiencies are out in time. And as you can see on here, you can see that in particular, like if you go up in here, you can see where the priority twos are, where the ADA issues are, and you can see within that system where the priorities, if it's an ADA, if it's an educational adequacy. And so this is why it's an important tool for that, is because when you look out in time, that'll be a really important thing that you will use for this. So I'll click off that. The other thing is to look at priorities. So, and this is an important tool for the school board to look at. And the reason for that is this is a good budgeting tool. And so I can look at this and I can say, well, I've got, almost $20 million of priority ones. And again, I'll never say that 20 million isn't a lot of money, because it's a lot of money. But for your portfolio to have only $20 million of priority ones is actually a tribute, again, to the condition of your facilities, which means your life safety issues are down, that the systems have been maintained. And a lot of these are that you've replaced systems that in the last 4 or 5 years, or 5 to 10 years, that have reduced this number quite a bit. But what's interesting to see is that I can go to, if I wanted to click on priority 1 and priority 2, now I'm at 55 million projected out. Now, if you guys are looking to do any sort of funding program down the road, this is a good tool to go out to your community and say, within the next 7 years, I've got $55 million worth of deficiencies of systems that will either reach their end of life or be in a condition where we should look at replacing them. And again, it's just an indicator, it's not a planning number. And the reason for that is you may say, well, we're just gonna replace that elementary school. Let's just replace that one elementary school. That'll take those deficiencies off, which means this number will reduce, and it gives you a planning indicator. But it also tells you, if you can go out to your community and say, look, at $55 million worth of deficiencies in the next 7 years, you can see from a 3-year to a 7-year, we just went almost to 3 times our deficiency amount. This is why being in front of our capital program is important. Because if I could triple in 3 years, what can I do in 10 years, or what can I do in 20 years if we don't keep up with it? So when you can group projects like this by priority, or by system, or by classification, or by school, all of a sudden you've got every tool that you need to make decisions down the road. So like I said, it's a good project tool, it's a good maintenance tool, it's a good budgeting tool for the board, and it gives you the capability to do all of these in the dashboard. And again, I still think there's some things that we're working on here, for instance, and I'll show you because I want you to know that when you scroll down on these priorities, for instance, the other groups don't scroll yet. We're trying to figure out, we gotta connect these 3. Sounds like an easy thing to do, right? But we'll get it fixed. So when you scroll down, the priorities will scroll with you and everything like that. But here's the other thing, is that if I just click on one of these right here, it'll actually just go right to that deficiency, or into that total cost of whatever that deficiency was. So I can even go in here and start to group, and you can see it just starts to add the cost for you. And so there's all kinds of different ways that you can do this, even within even within the classification. So like this classification right here, let me just blow this up so you can see it. So this is an architectural, okay, and it'll pull up whatever that architectural was. But if I go to like if I just say ceiling, and I can pull up where it is, it's $160,000 ceiling on this system right here, which is a new acoustical lay ceiling and grid throughout the facility. So again, and that's at one elementary, and it's not coming up on that screen, sorry about that. I can see it on mine actually. That's it, Priddle Elementary. So I can even click on an individual thing in my chart over here, and it'll show me which elementary and which deficiency or maintenance issue that you're dealing with. And so you can click in this thing, you probably have for a really long time, and try to, and break down as many different scenarios. I couldn't even calculate the number of scenarios you might find in here. But this is why going into these, and again, it's how you see the information is just as important as the information you got. And being able to work within the information was the purpose of the dashboard for you. And especially again, to David's team, is that this is really important to his team, because to be able just to click through projects and deficiencies instead of pulling up 15 Excel sheets and trying to combine projects or trying to provide or combine systems isn't an efficient way as we know to do things. And so, and it'll give him, when he is working with your contractors out there, he's gonna have budgets for them out of the gate. And it's not gonna be somebody giving you the budget, which is again a nice turnaround for a lot of school districts. And so you see all these things that can come out of there. And so I will go back into, and again, you have different things, like it can, like right here is all the reports. And so when you push on the reports, you're gonna get like Sparta Elementary School. And so in that right now, so right now the report, what it's doing is when you push on reports, it's giving you actually the big 500-page report. And right now we just did that because, but it's going to link, so when I'm on Sparta Elementary, this school what I'm on right now, I gotta figure out which school I'm on here.
That's the district.
Oh, that's a district, okay, so let me go to, this will be like, yeah, it's showing it here, but I can go into the reports, and this should just link right to that school. And right now, it's just going to the 500-page report. So by next Monday, when you're on that school, it'll just go right to the report, the school report. Okay, so, and that's something we were working on Monday and trying to just get the report in.
Can I point out a couple things too?
Yeah.
So as he was running through the different queries and on the priority items, so when you look at that first number of $103 million, so that is basically in these, you know, how many action items, I mean, how many line items did the EMA come up with? It was,
35.
I know it was over 100,000
100,000
photos,
lines, yeah.
35,000. So that's if everything in the district that's an architectural, mechanical, or facilities, if we decided we're gonna repair it all, whether it needs it or not, and remember, this is for the next 30 years too. So that's kind of a price tag at index pricing too, depending on which priority it is. So it's not saying that we would need $103 million bond to fix everything that needs to be fixed. That's just saying that as we look at the life of our buildings and all the anticipated costs, this is an approximate number that if you fixed everything that needed to be fixed, and because this is like, if you looked at the priorities carefully, it's, you know, put new asphalt in parking lots, new fire alarm systems, all those sorts of things that you would have to look at over time. And then the second, I'm glad that he brought up I'm glad he did the search and had Charter Oak, that priority one items at Charter Oak, was it $2 or $3 million or everything? But you gotta remember, that's probably like a $1.6 million roof in 2040 that's gonna need to be installed. So I think it's important to remember, this is kind of everything that they think potentially we might want to even consider addressing over a lifetime of 20 to 30 years.
Something I was wondering, with all this data we have available to us now, is there any tool in here where we could calculate to the stakeholders when we were going out for our next bond to put a per square foot cost? Like, we know it's more expensive at Miller Heights to run that campus because of energy and just different things. But is there a way to calculate how much we're saving, like at Charter Oak, per student or per square foot versus what we are at the older schools, where we can show people, hey, we're really saving money by building a new campus? Or is that kind of a mythical number to try to achieve?
So the FCI, and this is a critical element of the FCI. The FCI is a like-to-like replacement. And so this is why the FCI shouldn't always be used, but it's an indicator. It's not a planner for that. And the reason for that is that I go to, if I want to replace that school, let's say it's a replacement school, but I want to replace it for 600, not for its current capacity. Well, that's gonna have a different number on it. And so, but what it shows you is that, because here's what happens is that on those priority ones, those will escalate quickly to a priority 2 to a priority 3. And so the escalation of something like that, if not invested in, is going to escalate quicker than a charter oak, because it doesn't have priority ones. And so that number is already anticipated to be out there. So there's ways to display that. And I think a really good way to display it is to figure out how, if I show that, like this $104 million out there, that if I showed everybody that if I'm just gonna invest $1 million a year in my facilities, well, it's gonna take me 104 years to figure out how I get there. Well, that's not even the real number, because you know it'll escalate beyond that. But so what your idea then is to figure out what your funding mechanism is annually to stay in front of your FCI, to keep it level, and then what it takes to improve. And so the standard for what you want to go to, and right now you're a pretty good standard. So if you wanted to stay in your current district-wide FCI, if you want to stay at this 103 million, you can calculate what it takes to do that every year. And so most districts would love for their facilities to be under 30% as a whole. Like if I looked at my facilities portfolio and said everything's under, my average is 30%, you would be in the top 85% of school districts, or top 15% of school districts as far as condition of schools. And right now, you're not far off from that, frankly. And so that's where that tool can come into play for you.
I think tied to another point to that question is we could, there's some industry standards, and then we can calculate some like per footage utility costs and things like that. So we know what we spend on heat, and we know what we spend on power, we know what we spend on water and gas and everything else. And so we can do some internal processing of that too on what we spend at our other campuses. And a lot of it's going to depend on systems of, like whether you're using traditional HVAC or chillers or some, like we saw last week, some of the geothermal stuff that some of the newer schools are using as well.
And I got Jennifer to send me a copy of our last adopted budget, and our facilities and operations was right at 13 million. And she kind of gave me a breakdown of how we come up with that, and there's so many more things than I really realized. But out of that 13 million, is any of that going towards, some of it's going towards our, day-to-day maintenance costs, like the air conditioner goes out, or there is a leaky roof or something. How much of that 13 million would you say a dollar amount are we putting in the budget each year just to handle what we consider day-to-day? This will help us get to that number, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's part of the reason we're doing this right now, is to be able to get to that consistent effort of budgeting, to be able to say, this is what we need to invest in a regular maintenance budget, this is what we need to invest in a renovations budget, this is where we need to think long-term and growth in building new buildings. And all of those three things should help us with annual budget planning, but also 5-10-year forecasting out for our community. And they all kind of work together, so your question is a great one. That operational cost per school, absolutely. We can take square foot, we can take per pupil, and we can say, what does it actually cost us by building to run these schools?
So I know that we can, and mess around with the data on here, and I know there's a lot of data in here. For priority 1, I know we can do a search by that, 2, 3, and all that. And I know it's in here because you touched on it, but if we wanted to look and say, okay, as we stand today, what items do we need to be looking at in the next 12, 24, 36 months? That, hey, guys, this is coming no matter what happens, no matter what else we do. Where do we find that in?
So you can, there's a lot of different ways you can do that. So for instance.
I want the easiest.
Well, certainly the first priority is going to be your first 36 months. And so that can list anything you want. Now,
Well, hold on. But not, you're not saying priority one, because priority one, there's things that go out to 2024 and stuff like that, or 20. So you're saying if it's a priority one, it's gonna be in a 36-month window?
Yeah, so remember those, when we set the standard, those, in Michael's presentation. the
Okay,
1 to
yeah,
3,
okay.
Yeah, the 1 to 3 years are your priority.
Okay.
Okay, and so
Okay.
you're gonna be able to anticipate that. But one of the other things that I think you can anticipate is that, like, when you pull up, like in the classification, you go to classification, like, we pulled up roofs over you can see which are priority ones and priority twos, which means that in the next 7 years, these are roofs that are gonna demand attention.
Right.
And then you can see the future consideration. And so what you can do in that is you can look at it and say, well, if I've got, and let's just say I had 5 roofs on there in the next 7 years that need replaced. That's just an example. I can look on there and say, and David can go, you know what, I can do 1 roof in year 4, 1 roof in year 5, or I can do all 5 roof projects and get kind of the Costco model of labor and materials if I package them together.
Right.
And so I can group them into those years, and I can narrow them down. But you have the flexibility then, within that 4 to 7 years to say, you know what, if we replace it in year 4 and we replace them all, we could probably save 2 years of escalation, plus we can get a materials and labor break by package them all, as one example.
Right.
And so you can't put it into that, but I think that the tool will let you group it into time periods, and then you can narrow it down as it becomes a priority in your project.
Correct. The one facility about the roofs that's the most complicated is obviously Belton High School. When you're looking at the breakdown, we've just got, 2 that have a C rating, so that's coming up pretty quick, but overall, we've done a lot of work on that here, like, in the last 5 years.
Yep.
But that facility could be expanded it over time, because I know that's an interesting look.
And David can tell, I mean, there's been systematic replacement of pieces of that roof over the years too, so that's why you see the variation, like, not only when it was built, but then the repairs needed, and David, anything you wanna say on all that?
No, so we've done 3 phases of the roof, and the bulk has been replaced. There are 2 more sections that need to be replaced, but right now, we don't see any priority one type things, but it's certainly something within the next 5 to 7 years we need to look at.
And Tracy, I'm gonna speak out of turn on this too, but we're also, running these queries will also be able to, once you get it drilled down the way you want it, you'll be able to run an Excel of that print, right?
Yeah.
So,
You can. So
Yeah.
this is a good example you just said. So what I did was I sorted by, over here, I sorted by Belton High School, and then I sorted by roof over here. So I got roof replacement at Belton High School. And as I go back over here, I can see that I've got a priority 1, which are your 2 items in priority 1. And so if I just click on that one, I can see that that's your $225,000 of those 2 sections that we just talked about.
There you go, that's quick.
That's how quick you can see in your 1 to 3 years what it takes to replace it. And you see the rest of them are under future consideration because, and let me click off of that really quick. So are under future because replacement. And so they're gonna be 7+ years, probably 10+ years. So that's how quick you can see that. And again, it just takes some, it just takes some playing around with it and kind of learn it. And like I said, on Monday, we'll try to figure out how to get this bigger on the screen, because it's hard to see up here.
Yeah, you can't see it.
Yeah, it's like really easy here. And so I think that'll be a challenge, but we'll figure it out. I'll get it. And hopefully, like I said before Monday, you guys will play around with this some more and be able to get some more responses.
Yeah, the dashboard stuff was really not having to watch you, it was hard to try to navigate, I gave up.
Yeah, so until you learn kind of how you want to divide up the systems like that, and that's part of it. I mean, I've been working on this a while, so I know how to, like, when you were talking about that, I know I could click the Belton High, so I can go to roofs, and I can pull up exactly what you want to see.
Got it.
There you go.
Yeah.
And then if you just want to see what needs replaced quicker, hit the priority 1, boom, you're done. You get it down to that $225,000. or whatever it was.
Okay, great. Any other questions on dashboard? And we will work between now and Monday to get it.
Yeah, we'll figure out how to get that bigger on the screen, like in a big picture.
Any other questions on dashboard? We gave each of you a copy of the Sparta report. I think y'all had access to the draft reports of all of those. And really, the reason it's still kind of in draft format is, as Tracy mentioned, and I mentioned in the email, we're still finalizing the design capacity or functional capacity, and so we won't release a final version until we get those hammered out. And then we just go in room by every school in the district, and not just the room, but what it's being used for, and try to hone that in. So I did want to briefly go through this. So these are a little more static than the dashboard. So if you want to just really get a look at kind of current conditions at any of our campuses or any of our buildings and facilities for that matter, then you can pull up the individual report. And so you can see that it has each one of our priorities listed, but it's listed by discipline. So all architectural ones are grouped, all the building envelope, roofings, the civils, the electrical, the same way you can do the searches on the dashboard, but it just kind of has that pre-grouped in these reports. And so you can see if you wanted to look at electrical, what kind of condition. Looks like we have a lot of priority 2 items, and then it kind of gives a description. And the thing I like about this too, it also gives the source. So you can see, is this something that a member of EMA or a member of N2 observed while they were on a campus? Did this come from principal input? Did this come from our facilities personnel input? So you can kind of see where the kind of the different sources and the different input levers that went into this. And then you'll see at the end, if you look on the third page, kind of at the end of each one, you have a breakdown for that campus by priority, and then you have your future considerations and your maintenance, and then it also has gives you your facility condition index as well. So it gives you a facility condition repair cost, then a replacement soft cost, and then that's kind of where you get your formula for facilities index.
So one question I have is when I was looking through this part of the reports, and it was really easy to go through Charter Oak and like Belton High School, save us some time. But when I saw how many, some campuses, there were several, like Sparta, there's like 7 principal recommendations, and the rest of them were consultant. Do we give that higher priority? I know we have the 1, 2, 3 priority, but because of the principal asks and brings a problem to us, do we have a way to kind of go around the rubric to make that a higher priority?
Absolutely. We, as a school district, we get to make those determinations. Yeah. And that's part of what I think we'll be talking about with this group over the next, few months. Now, caveat to that, there's a difference between wants and needs. I know as a high school principal what my want list was, and I would say it was a need sometimes, and it was a want. And so we have to constantly work through that, because $103 million is $103 million. Right. That being said, absolutely, part of the reason we just wanted the assessment and the data was so that we could prioritize the way we need to.
So can I get a quick example?
Mm-hmm.
And because like right here, this is a really good example. It just happens to be this one. You see on the principal questionnaire, replace PA system throughout the building. So the assessors don't go into like the auditorium and turn on every microphone. I mean, that would be a $1 billion assessment. But talking to the principal, and they know it doesn't work, all of a sudden it put it as priority 1 because they could tell us it didn't work. And so that's why the principal questionnaire is so important to an assessment, because you're not going to go out, and again, unless you pay an exorbitant amount for assessment, you're never gonna test every microphone, you're never gonna bore every roof, you're never going to, when the principals tell you on a sunny day that the roof leaks over here, we can walk to that spot. That's why the principal questionnaire is so important. And so it can be a priority.
I want to speak to one other thing too on these. So you'll notice as we move to the educational adequacy, we didn't prioritize those because that's going to come out of a process. And if you look at the bottom of just page 2 there, where it gets into educational adequacy items, none of those are priced out. And that's very intentional, because if you look at just any of these, let's look at the third one. Consider enhancing interior building wayfinding signage. So I mean, that sounds pretty simple. So they're basically saying, we don't have signs in the building to tell people where to go. There's no cost estimate on that because there's lots of different strategies you could use to address that problem. You could put up flat panel monitors in every hallway, in every corner, in every classroom, and have announcements and presentations and things constantly going with signage and everything else. Or you could go have some magnetic strips made to put above classroom doors instead of restroom that way. So I think it's going to be, this is a deficiency we see, but the strategy is going to depend on us to go through our process of design to figure out how we want, if we wanted to solve that deficiency, to address it. And if we do want to address that deficiency, what are our options and what do we want to do and what can we afford to do? So when you see things that, when it talks about flexible furniture, collaborative spaces, when it talks about signage, when it talks about movable, displayable technology, things like that, that's where we're going to have the freedom in our design of how we what we want to address and how we want to address it. And that's kind of all goes back to those standards that we established. So.
And Mike, I think it's also true, we may change some priorities. For instance, if you look at Sparta Elementary, the electrical items, a lot of it is exterior lighting.
Mm-hmm.
We may look at that as priority one for life safety and security.
I noticed that on Miller Heights, there were still some lighting issues on that campus, and we just did a ton of lighting stuff at Miller Heights, but there was still more after this assessment, so, yeah.
Does that make sense about the pricing on the educational ones though? Is that
I did.
there's going to be lots of different strategies we can look at, and it's hard to put a price tag on when you have 6 or 7 different options to address a deficiency. We've got to figure out what the best strategies are. So.
And where it can be used, adequacy can be used on prioritization of project. So you may see, like, you get to a point where you know you're gonna spend this much money, and you've got 2 schools that are almost identical on the MEP stuff, but this one's got 50 educational deficiencies, this one's got 10. You may say, well, this is a priority because we need to fix these. And so it ends up being a good prioritization tool for you guys too.
So as you go through the rest of the report, you see the individual photos that tie back to the priority items. So there is a column in the individual items. If there's a photo in the item, it tells you which photo it is. So if you see that it says provide you electronic marquee sign, and you would go to photo 4, it would show you the sign that you currently have. So those are there is some tie-in with these pictures back to the priority list, to the discipline list. Then each one will have a campus scorecard on our adequacy, and then each one, this is the part that I think is pretty cool. So you get into your mechanical equipment list, where you have, not only do you have individualized lists with model numbers, serial numbers, manufacturer years, all that type of stuff. You also have campus maps that shows you where all of your units and things of that nature are. And then you also have the complete roofing assessment, as y'all pointed out, for each one. So you have about a 7 or 8 page roofing assessment for this school as well. So we have one of these for each campus, and we have one for each other building. Support services, administration, 6th Street, all the Swinton Auditorium, all of this. So,
I noticed one picture that's gonna stick in my head, is the wooden steps at the boys' bathroom at Wilson Kersey. Those wooden steps have been there for a really long time. You gotta take a picture of it because we need to get rid of them or something. We're kind of sentimental about those steps.
Unless they have historical value.
Yes, they do.
So any questions? I know y'all had some time to look at the reports, and just like you indicated, Ty, y'all probably spent more time in the reports than the dashboard so far, just because it's gonna take practice getting around in that thing. So, any questions about reports? We did, Anna brought kind of the summary page too. This was the first, I think, 7 pages of the packet you were given. It has the glossary of terms. It has kind of the conditions, standards that we use. It has the summary scorecard of all of the adequacy indexes, and then it has kind of a breakdown by school of priority 1, 2, 3, 4, future costs and maintenance items as well, and ADA.
Quick question, the campus scorecard
Yes.
that you went over, is that available in the dashboard as well?
So
The educational adequacy one.
No, that just, it says the
That's just showing you.
Yeah, the campus scorecard, like for Sparta.
Right now, when you go into the dashboard and you pull up reports, and it's gonna link a PDF to that.
Oh, so it'll be a PDF, it's not built
It will
into
be
the
in
data.
It won't, it's not broken down. into
Okay,
the
that's fine,
dashboard.
if not, I was gonna spend all night trying to find it.
Now, it is, you're gonna get the total score on the main page where it's gonna have your facilities condition index, and right next to that will be your total score, but it won't have the breakdown scores.
Right.
So, you'll have to dig into the report to get that. Other questions? I think what I would like to hear maybe is just some general feedback on just your observations. And Todd, you gave some at the beginning, and just having a couple of days to kind of glance through this a little bit, kind of what sticks out and what types of things might we want to consider Monday night to make sure we point out to the full board.
Aaron?
Well, thorough is what comes to my mind. This, you may have already answered this, but this is something that the community will be able to see, correct? So I'm just wondering if, a friend of mine wants to look at this, it might overwhelm her. I wonder if maybe putting like a video to show like how to access it, or even a frequently asked questions like, what does this mean, or just some quick ways to get the information, but I think maybe even a video of how to peruse, or maybe even just a series of videos, like what is educational advocacy, and maybe kind of going through that. I think that would be something that would be interesting or helpful to families that this might say, I'm not even gonna take a lot of time to do that, but if it was just kind of hitting some of those highlighted, really important things we want them to know, do a little video, and then, okay, so go on and click here, and that way they have some of that background information when they're looking.
I think you mentioned that too, though, there'll be a filter down, you said forward, throughout the
And
town.
whatever's front facing, I think that's something
Yeah.
that we'll talk about internally. I think as board members, you should think about, like, what do you think should be front facing, what should not be?
I think some of the nuts and bolts about security issues,
Yeah, we don't need to.
floor
Yeah.
plans, some of those kind of things, I think those need to be left out of it.
That's a wise idea. I mean, all those things that protect students, staff, community
Yeah.
members are good to keep out.
Yeah.
And again, even on the second page, you may wanna see what you wanna limit there. I mean, we can lock things down if we need to, but I agree. I mean, it's not easy. The front dashboard is really intended to be, like, if a community member pulled it up, they can see the enrollment, the capacity, the FCI of the building, just a quick information piece.
Right.
So take the 5,000 pages of data that's through that dashboard, pull it down into a very simple, so that it's not hard for people to
That's right.
scroll, to where somebody like me could even scroll through and be like, okay, this is what Sparta is, I see it.
Something that would maybe in this, instead of doing a series of videos, do a video for each campus. And, you know, have somebody over
Have
this
somebody just walk through
screen and walk you through it in the video. I mean, you just hear like a voiceover of someone, kind of talking to you, looking here, this is about Chisholm Trail, this is,
Addition of facility and goal and all of that, in a lot of districts don't do a forward-facing thing. But for us, in the dialogue that we've had over the last year, transparency with our community about current status of where we are, I think is important. So a filtered down version to make it easy to navigate makes a ton of sense.
And I think the video thing's a good idea, we could even integrate our kids at the high schools. You know, maybe we could help produce that,
They can
maybe
build that
possibly
very
give them
easily.
something to work towards.
and then the other comment, I know it's already been said, but I just wanna, just maybe reiterate, like, prioritizing within the priorities too. I agree with that. 1A is the first year of priority 1, or 1B is the second year of priority 1.
I think when I was looking through this, I think the thing that stuck out to me the most was the projection stuff. That to me is amazing, and the pricing, I'm in construction, I price stuff all the time, that's a lot of work when you're putting together huge bids. This blew my mind, the number, how many numbers were out there. But for us to be able to do what you said, click into, you know, the 3 to 7, and then the 7 to this, and break it out year by year of estimated costs. We know we're coming. You know, we know these air conditioners, we know these roofs, some of those type of things. To me, that's very impressive. We can do our priorities list like we did last year, and come up with things we can see. We can interview principals, we can walk these things to see things. But the scope of this and the planning that we can put into this now is I think, the strength of money well spent on this project, no doubt.
And even for those, the educational advocacy, you know, for some parents that may not understand what collaboration means, we could give this is what we have versus, you know, I didn't take any pictures last week, but, kind of like, these are some ideas of, you know, what it could look like, and get parents excited for, opportunities.
Jeff?
So just trying to, I'm just going through all the data, so trying, is there a place on the, I mean, I love the dashboard, although, I mean, it is a lot of data. Is it built into the dashboard, because I've been looking for it, and it's probably in here, or it's in one of these or in the other.
One of the 17 things we have.
Yeah, do we have a score for overall?
So,
The district-wide score, like, we took it all and added it together, Belton, this is where you stand. as a whole.
we can do that, so here's.
Oh, no, I don't want to spend any more money, I was just asking if it was in here, and I had to say that.
It's actually not, it's not that difficult a process, because you want, I mean, your assets, you know, you've got however many assets you have in the district.
Right.
And they all have a value. And so if I know the replacement cost of all your elementary schools, that square footage is $300 a square foot, and then middle schools is $350, and high schools is $375. We could do a quick analysis to say that this is a replacement cost by square foot, and so of your, 6 million square feet, what's the number? It's something, it's whatever the number is, then you just do a quick math calculation on it. And so let's just say, well, let's make it easy. If you have 5 million square feet and it's $300 a square foot, you're at 15 million, and I've got 100. I've got, you know, whatever, 104 million is by 15 million, and then you can do a quick SCI on that.
Okay.
That gives you a total kind of look at it. It just gets complicated once again. And it's also, it's a number that you want to be careful with. And again, I always, in an assessment, as Michael said earlier, people are gonna see 104 million. When, look, you're gonna freak out. 104 million is a lot of dollars, I mean, it is. But in retrospect, to your point, you want them to know, well, in the grand scheme of a $10 billion program, whatever it is, it's not that big a deal.
Right.
And so that's the message you want to get across. But you also want to get across that 105 isn't your number. That's not the number. The number comes in planning, it's your next details, it's, you know, how you want to prioritize. That's your number.
Right.
But I think it's a good exercise to let people know the magnitude of what 105 million really is. Because that's important.
Matt?
I think a couple of things. I think we appreciate the board's support in allowing us to get this information, because as an administrative team, some of these things, I think Tracy alluded to, some of these things are a little bit of a moving target. Everybody has an opinion on what they see or what they feel when they walk into a building, but the detail behind it all is super important. And for us to be able to have some of this information and for you to allow us to dive into this in more detail with y'all over the next few months helps us know and understand how to best maximize our resources for our kids. And so thank you for your support in allowing us to do this. Second thing is, I want to make sure I thank Mike and David and Melinda and our team here. The team that we brought in and hired to do this has done great work, but our team did equally great work. And it took a ton to get to this point. We pushed it hard, and being real honest, and we didn't want to do something that didn't align to the journey of a graduate, because if we did that, then why in the world did we spend time working on Journey of a Graduate? So we have done our best to align everything along the way, and I feel really good about where we are on this now. So I wanted to make sure I recognize them. Next steps for us and all of this, we'll huddle up with the team here and make sure that we have things polished and ready for Monday, and that we have some delivery for our workshop on Monday. And if you have ideas as a facilities committee of how to best maximize the board's workshop time on Monday, please let us know, because we can make that happen.
The one idea I have is to let Jeff do the tutorial on the dashboard.
Well, what I would say on that, obviously y'all gotta work to figure out how to get it on the screen, but if we will pick one campus and one thing, and just have somebody walk us all through it one time, not allow any questions. Done. But I mean, sitting here doing it with him, you figured it out and could do it, but otherwise, we're just gonna scatter and.
Everybody's gonna sit there with glazed looks in their eyes and watch the screen.
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
That's a good point.
But if we all do it together, then I think, and just know, hey, we're gonna look at, North Belton, and we're gonna look at this, walk through it, here's what it shows, and then people can take these back home and start to figure out, what it is we're looking at. I mean, I've seen, the educational adequacy, that one I think some people are gonna have some questions about, trying to understand, because you have a very big discrepancy in facilities that have the same educational adequacy score. I mean, some of our older campuses and some of our, not brand new, but some of our even newer ones have that same score. And I know people are gonna be, well, wait a minute, how can two campuses have that same score? But then they see the condition index and they're like, well, wait a minute, why is it like this?
And I mentioned that early on, that in Purtle, Carver,
Yeah.
Lakewood, they had the same scores as our older, on that index.
Yeah.
But then Melinda explained to us that kind of how we get to that number.
Right,
Versus the
right.
percentage of that's where the breakout becomes, more obvious.
Mike said this to me a while ago, and I thought it was a really good illustration of this. And he talked about we homeowners at a house, and if we had a team come in and give us the entire list of repairs over the next 20 years,
We'd all be depressed.
we would, every one of us, and we'd sit there and go, I didn't know I had $250,000 of repairs to do to my house, right? And I think we just gotta remember that in the scope of this too. So when the report about when you see that 103 million, that's a big number, and there's a lot in there. But there's also cost over time, and priority 2 and priority 3 items in some cases, and there's a lot that changes during that time. So while there's a big list and a big number, I don't want us to only focus on the big number. I want to be able to say, hey, just think about some of these things, we're gonna say, we're quite all right, it's exactly the way it is. And we appreciate them noting it, and that's for us to decide. So.
Well, I guess we're getting ready to wrap this thing up. I knew this was gonna be a lot. And I knew that the overall opinion of our district was gonna be higher. I just knew, because our facilities have been taken such good care of. So those things didn't surprise me at all. But I'm glad now that y'all have the tools to make it to where we're spending our money, Jennifer's money over there as efficiently as possible for our stakeholders. And this is the best way to do it. And I will say, obviously bringing in Matt and him bringing in his people, Melinda and the different folks, we knew we were lucky, but then when we got to go tours the facilities in their old districts and see the level that those people are doing things at in a fast growth, Georgetown and Leander, when I got to hang out with some of those people and listen to their comments and things, I came home with a better feeling of where we're going based on the people we have here. We've been blessed in Belton ISD for a long time. We've had really good leadership for a long time. But this group here is going to take us to another level. And this right here helps us to maximize what we can do for our kids and our teachers to be able to do things for our kids. So we're blessed to have this team. And y'all did a great job, honestly. Really, really good. I want to thank you guys and commend y'all for your work. So
We don't do it without, this team's amazing.
they are. We're blessed.
Amazing, yeah, no doubt.
So if we don't have anything else, is there any issues, concerns?
One thing that I do want to mention too is goal in all of this is this spring was to have a series of presentations to our facilities committee. So remember, We had demographer report, that's a big deal for facilities. We have this facilities assessment, that's a big deal. We're in the middle of developing some strategic plan priorities that a group is going to talk about what priorities we need to have in the school district moving forward as a facilities too. Our job as a facilities committee is gonna be really diving in and having some good discussions about next steps that the board might wanna consider. And so any of these things that you've seen over the last couple of months and that you're hearing, if you have questions, please let us know. We got some accelerated work to do over the next few months. If we need to start planning for, future bond elections. So those timelines are gonna be tricky. And so please reach out and let us know if you have questions.
All right, that's it. Adjourned.